Monday was John Gilbert's birthday. I love John Gilbert so much. I was unable to watch any of the John Gilbert films except Flesh and the Devil, which I have seen many times. It was the only one that played after I got home from work, so I had to wait until I had time to watch all the John Gilbert movies that we showed, because we mostly showed ones that I hadn't seen before. Like we showed Flesh and the Devil and we showed The Big Parade, and then I think like everything else we showed, I was like, oh, and Downstairs. Downstairs is great. Um, but we showed 8 John Gilbert films, I guess, because 3 I'd seen and 5 I hadn't seen, so I watched them today. And 4 of them were silence, and one of them was a pre-code. So the first one was La Bohème. It's from 1926 and it's directed by King Vidor. It is the story of La Bohème. So if you don't know the story of La Bohème, go read about that. Who are you? Gilbert is Rodolphe, and Lillian Gish is Mimi, and Renee Adoré is Musette. And there's a really great little part with Edward Everett Horton, and the Viscount is played by Roy D'Arcy. I'm not sure. I think he's in Our Blushing Brides. Also, let's see here. Does not say. I'm thinking of somebody else. Right? No, I think he's in Our Blushing Brides. Is he? No. Okay, I'm thinking of somebody else. Anyways, it's good. Lillian Gish is great. She dies with style. John Gilbert is like to die for. He makes some faces where you're like, I love you so much, and it's just beautiful. King Vidor, lush, especially the outdoor sequences. I feel like I don't think anybody films the outdoors in the silent era as well as King Vidor. It's just absolutely gorgeous film. That one is available. I think all of these actually are available from Warner Archive Collection. So if you can't watch them on Watch TCM, you can watch them that way. The next one I watched was 1927's The Show, which is directed by Todd Browning. This one was so good. This was a great double feature with Todd Browning's Freaks. Actually, it's also set in a sideshow. John Gilbert plays Cock Robin, who is the barker, and Renee Adoré is Salome, who obviously plays Salome in the show. And Gilbert is fleecing a rich country girl, and Renee Adoré is in love with him, but she's sort of stuck with Lionel Barrymore playing the Greek. He's like majorly a heavy in this, and she's trying to break up with him, tell John Gilbert to stop fleecing unwitting women. There's moments, much like in The Unknown, there's that moment in The Unknown where, if you haven't seen that film, Lon Chaney almost gets his limbs ripped from him by horses. There's a few moments like that in this where John Gilbert's head almost gets chopped off, and I was like, oh my god, are they gonna chop off John Gilbert's head? What is happening? There's a spider woman and poisonous iguana and all kinds of stuff in this movie. Renee Adoré has one of those faces that is so expressive. This is just a beautiful late era film with all the creepiness you expect from a Todd Browning production. Definitely recommend it. Had a much happier ending than I was expecting. So now you can expect a happy ending. The next one I watched was actually probably my least favorite of all the films I watched, and this was 1928's A Woman of Affairs, directed by Clarence Brown. Clarence Brown directed some of the greatest Garbo films. He did The Flesh and the Devil, and he's done a lot of great films. This one was one of my least favorites that I've seen of his, of Garbo, of Gilbert. Gilbert really didn't get to do much. This also had Johnny Mac Brown and Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and it still wasn't that great. I do, however, think that the Douglas Fairbanks Jr. character was gay, and I want people to watch it and tell me what they think, because they couldn't out and out say that, but I think it. Johnny Mac Brown is beautiful. Watch him in all the movies. John Gilbert doesn't get to do very much in this movie. This is very much a Greta Garbo film. Garbo has the most screen time. The plot is that Greta Garbo, John Gilbert, and Johnny Mac Brown all grew up together. Garbo is in love with Gilbert, obviously. Gilbert is poor. Garbo is from a rich family, but a rich family that has drunk themselves to death, and literally the only people left are her and her brother, who is slowly drinking himself to death. Gilbert's father won't let him, played by Louis Stone, won't let him marry Garbo. He's going to send him off to Egypt to make money. Maybe when he's back, if he's rich enough, he can marry her. For some reason, Garbo doesn't wait. She marries Johnny Mac Brown. Johnny Mac Brown, for reasons you find out later, on their honeymoon, kills himself. And you're like, oh shit. So now Garbo's married, but like a widow, but she like stays in Europe because, she drove her husband to death, apparently, according to everyone's gossip. And so now she has to like have affairs with people because that's what women who drive their husbands to death do. And then she finally comes back to England because her brother is dying, and because he's finally drunk himself to death. And she sees John Gilbert again, only he's about to get married to, who was it? This one is from Our Dancing Daughters. He's about to get married to Dorothy Sebastian, and you're like, there's so many people in this movie. If only it were better. The one thing I can say about it is that Garbo is great. It is one of the best Garbo performances, but she is the movie, and there's too much of everyone else not being good to make up for the fact that she is so good, so it's uneven, basically. So that was A Woman of Affairs. The next one I watched was Desert Nights. This one's missing an entire reel, so it's shorter than it should be, and it gets a little confusing, but it's great. It's a great desert adventure. It's the like most rugged I've ever seen John Gilbert. He grows a fake beard at one point. He's really masculine. There's a scene where they're like pouring water down his throat, and I was like, I can't handle this. He co-stars with Mary Nolan and Ernst Torrance. He's a diamond guy. They are trying to steal the diamonds from him. They're lost in the desert. They have to survive and keep the diamonds and not die of thirst. The movie was actually called Thirst originally, but also it's like a thirst trap because like John Gilbert is so attractive in this movie. And at one point, Mary Nolan is like, I'll give you the diamonds. I'll give you myself. Just give me water. And he's just like, And it is so good. It is so good. So this movie was just delightful. It's like an adventure and a romantic comedy and like water and just all the things you want in a movie all in one delightful film. And that was directed by William Nigh. And then the final film I watched, this was a pre-code. This was Wait for a Sailor, directed by Sam Wood. It has a reputation for being terrible, so I was expecting it to be terrible. And the first 20 minutes are rough. They're rough. But then once it gets past that, it's actually quite fun. And it co-stars Layla Hyams and Wallace Beery and a really beautiful seal named Alfred. The seal kind of steals the last 10 minutes of the movie. But basically, there's a bunch of sailors. They have a girl in every port. John Gilbert falls in love with Layla Hyams and spends 2 years every time he's in the same port trying to get with her. And eventually it works out, but then he's lied to her, and so she's just like, what are you doing? And there's chaos, and then maybe a shipwreck, and at one point, John Gilbert is in his underwear, and at another point, Wallace Beery is hanging out with a seal, and there's a whole big section where Gilbert, like, convinces Wallace Beery that he can buy this musical instrument for him, and Wally is so good in that scene where he stopped being this, like, ruffian and starts being, like, this nerd because he really wants this instrument, and John Gilbert has just, like, got him entranced. And there's a few things that don't quite age well in this film. Like, at one point, John Gilbert is in China and he calls people chinks. That's no good. There's also a very stereotypical Jewish secondhand salesman. Those things do not age well in this film. But you remember it's 1930, and you're like, yeah, there's a lot of things that don't age particularly well. So, this movie has a bad reputation, but for the most part, it's really good. And there's some scenes between Hyams and Gilbert that are really as witty as anything you'd want in a pre-code film. So I definitely recommend checking it out, especially if you love seals. Some really, really good moments with the seal. So these films were La Bohème, the show A Woman of Affairs, Desert Nights, and Way for a Sailor. I believe they're all available from Warner Archive Collection. You can watch them all on Watch TCM until Monday. John Gilbert is fantastic. You should love him as much as I do. Everyone would have a better life if they had more John Gilbert in it.